This episode of The Minimalists is brought to you by nobody, because advertisements suck.
This podcast has bad words.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I'm Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are The Minimalists.
And today we're going to talk about redemption.
Yeah.
And so why not bring Matt Cox on the podcast to talk about redemption? Matt, thanks for being here today.
Oh, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Man, I first saw your story, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and I was just so fascinated, and I don't know where to start. Let's just establish a few facts, and then we got some audience questions we can answer as well, but I want to establish where you came from, what happened, and how did we get to where we are right now. So let's start with, on your website it says, "My name is Matthew B. Cox, and I'm a con man."
Right.
Let's talk about that. Let's unpack it a bit.
I mean, that's just, it's funny when I introduce myself like that, because initially, like when I would read newspapers articles about me, like when I was on the run for 3 years, and I would read newspaper articles, and they would describe me, as a con man and a fraudster and a narcissist and arrogant, and I was like, Mike, you don't know me. What do you? I would get so upset. And they have psychiatrists who are kind of dissecting me. And I mean, he's never met me, and he's never, But I think I mentioned this to you on the phone that if does it matter if I cuss?
It's fine.
Okay. That if enough people call you an asshole, you're probably an asshole. And at some point, you have to kind of come to grips with that. And so enough people started saying that. And I would tell people, yeah, man, they said, the girl at the time, yeah, they said this. Can you believe that? And she was like, well, yeah, but, yeah, I could see how people might think that. And it was just like, you start, and then when you start writing, like I went to prison, I started writing, you start to kind of dissect yourself and other people, and you start to kind of go, yeah, I think I'm a narcissist. And I do hit all these categories. I think yeah, that was arrogant. Why would I do that? You start to come to grips with it, and and then I guess accept it, and that's just the way it is. I mean, and try and deal with it. Before
we get into the redemption part, we have to establish what we are redeeming. Like, what are we trying to fix? And so we need to go back to your past. So when you say you're a con man, the way I've described you, and by the way, as soon as I listened to the first interview I saw you do, you're an amazing storyteller.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, you do such a good job of telling different stories, weaving them together. It's truly fascinating. I mean, immediately I was sending your story to my book agent. I was sending it to Ryan. I was sending it to my wife. Like, you've got to listen to this. And I was just so fascinated. But you say that you're a con man, but it started in real estate. I've been calling, when I was sending your interview over to Ryan and Sean and everyone else, I was calling you the James Bond of real estate fraud. Because the story, my first thought was like, why am I watching this when I should be watching the movie version of what's going on?
Yeah, everybody says that.
Let's set up the
It really should
Let's
be.
set up the movie version. In the first scene here, I think, is you Breaking Bad, so to speak. And so what was the impetus? What started the... Because here's my theory, by the way. We're all Matt Cox. We're all one or two bad decisions away. By the way, we've all made bad decisions. Not just mistakes, but bad decisions. And then all of a sudden, it starts to unravel.
Yeah.
It wasn't your intention to become the James Bond of real estate fraud.
No.
The first time you made a slight indiscretion. So where did it start?
I mean, it's every time I get asked this question, it's horrible because I hate to complain about my childhood. My father was an alcoholic, right? He was mentally abusive. Basically, I was not the son that he thought he was going to have. I have a learning disability. I did not excel in school. I was, I wasn't 5'10", 5'11". I wasn't super athletic. I wasn't the kid that I think he wanted. And as a result of that, he showed me either no interest or it was almost like mental abuse. But I hate to say, that had such a, that was a huge part of it, because I've been to prison and I know guys that at 5 years old, their mother held them down and burned them with an iron. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's your punishment.
Yeah.
I mean, and they don't even think it's wrong. Like, they're like, oh yeah, she thought I stole something, and then she found it behind her dresser a couple days later, and she was sorry. I mean, like, I remember she brought me to Toys R Us, and I got to pick up any toy I wanted. Like, he's thinking it's okay, and I'm sitting there thinking, don't you ever complain because Daddy didn't hug you,
Right. Right.
But it's still how it affected you. Yeah. And as I got older, I eventually, I go to college. I get out of college. I remember I graduated college with a degree in fine arts because I have a severe case of dyslexia. I had to go to special schools my whole life. And I was lucky because my father could afford those schools. He didn't have a problem throwing money at he didn't have a problem with throwing money at me. So I go to the schools. I graduate. Eventually I go to college. I get a degree in fine arts. And when I graduate, I remember he said, you got a degree in fine arts. He's like, what, he goes, that basically qualifies you to, you can draw caricatures of sweaty tourists at Disney World with that degree. That's about all you can do. And I was sitting there thinking, it's like I'm never going to be happy. So I end up I became an insurance adjuster. That didn't work out because I just couldn't keep up with the workload. Okay. I eventually get laid off. I started working construction. I date a girl. She's working for a subprime lender, and she says, hey, you've got to do this. You're made for doing this. I'm like,
what year is this roughly?
I want to say this is 97, 98. So I very quickly, my very first loan, it's a fraud. Like, I'm literally, I get a customer, I'm thrilled, I get all the documents, I stick them all together, I bring it to my manager, she looks through them, and I remember she looks through the whole thing, and she pulls out one document, and she's like, this is perfect, but this has a 30-day late on it. Go get some whiteout. She actually pulled out the whiteout. Now I remember she was going, she pulled it out, she goes, go white this out, make a copy, put it back. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, that's fraud. She's like, first of all, they're not going to catch it. Secondly, maybe if they catch it, you lose your job. Nobody's calling the FBI. You want to do it? She goes, nobody's looking for my car. Because, I was like 2 car payments behind. I'm like hiding my vehicle. Oh, wow. And she's like, nobody's looking for my car. And I was like, and all I could think about, I remember this, was thinking, if I don't come up with some money soon, I'm moving in my parents' spare room and listening to my dad bully my mother, talk shit to me. And I was like, absolutely not. I went and whited it out. Couple days later, closes. I get a check for, I don't know, it's $3,000, $3,500, something like that. A huge amount of money.
Yeah. More than you had ever had up to that point.
I've never had a check written to me for $3,500. That's insane.
Right. And so this is the first stepping stone. All of a sudden, and by the way, you were encouraged in a way to do it.
Right.
It wasn't even something that you came up with at first.
No, I honestly just thought, I remember that's it. It's dead. It's over. Like, I didn't even think to myself, get rid of it. Like, that wasn't something I'd worked for one company. I got my license, worked for one company. I'd been there a few weeks. It just fraud wasn't even something that was being brought up.
Yeah.
So she said, do it. It's no big deal. I do it all the time. They're not going to catch it. Don't worry about it. Okay, I do it. I get the money. And then the next guy that comes in, he made whatever, $45,000 that year, but if he made 55, he could get the loan. And if that 4 was a 5, we'd be all good.
Just one numeral change.
It's no big deal.
Yeah.
You have a degree in fine arts.
It's a printing error.
You can do this. So I changed that one, closes. Next person, something else, closes. Literally, next thing you know, it's like 4 loans the first month, it's 6 the next, it's 8, it's 10, it's 12. They make me a branch manager. Then I eventually end up, there were issues at that company. I end up starting my own company. I hire 12 guys. My dad thinks like, this kid's amazing. He's great. I got my brother who's borrowing money all the time.
You're getting the validation that you wanted.
Oh, man.
Listen, my father, I started flipping houses, would lend me money. Like, he would say, so you're doing what? I bought this house for $40,000. We're going to put 20 into it, and I'm going to sell it. And how do you know you can sell it? And I know I can get the loan for the guy. I can this, I can that. And I know I can get the loan for you. So, which is a big problem for most people that buy and sell houses. I'm sorry I keep looking at him because of the hair.
Okay.
It's the hair.
No, that's all right.
But it's you're more shaggy and he's pretty and shiny.
I like to think of myself as appropriately disheveled.
You've got the rock star thing. You look like you should be on stage, and he looks like a GQ model.
That's great. He does look like a GQ model. No worries at all, man.
I'm being generous. Come on, I need you to push my book.
Milburn is very easy to talk to.
So all right, we've established that all of a sudden the snowball has happened, and we're going to dive into the details on the Maximal. I want people to know, like, there's so many stories that we're going to be able to get into here, but we're talking about basically a 10-year period from that first fraud,
right,
to realizing that you're going to go away to prison.
Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, and you were on the run from the FBI for 3 years.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, it was the FBI, U.S. Marshals, of course. If you're on the run, it's the U.S. Marshals. So it's the U.S. Marshals, the FBI, and the Secret Service. And it was number one on the Secret Service's most wanted list for 2 years.
Wow.
And they were actively, like, really looking for me. Like, the other people are more reactive, but the Secret Service is like, they're making calls, they're going out to people's houses, they're really looking. And yeah, so.
Well, before we get into the questions, I want to give our audience, like, a really awesome story, and you have so many between, your manager taking that one sheet out up until, they're like, "Are you Matthew Cox?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm Matthew Cox."
Oh, yeah.
You're like, all right, you got me finally. Do you have a favorite story that, like, you just find yourself constantly telling between, the beginning and the end? What's your favorite?
I mean, the only problem with that story, the one that's so, like, catch me if you can't say, it's just over the top, is because it requires a little bit of setup. So if I streamline the story is when I had borrowed like $1.3 million in the name of a guy, Gary Sullivan, which was a guy that was actually a homeless prostitute in Las Vegas. I'd gone there, I surveyed him, I got his information. So I then went and got
pretended you were doing surveys for the government.
For the Salvation Army.
Okay.
Right. Which got me an enhancement, by the way. That was an extra 2 levels, 3 levels, so that was an extra 4 or 5 years.
Oh my God.
Wow. So because I had made a little badge that said I was with the Salvation Army, and therefore I hurt their image, and the government said, yeah, he deserves extra time for that.
Yeah.
5 years. All these enhancements, like, people don't realize, like, what the money I stole isn't that big of a deal. Like, the $6 million, okay, you do 4 or 5 years. It's all the enhancements. Then you fled jurisdiction. That's an enhancement. Sophisticated means, meaning what you did was sophisticated. An enhancement. What mean? It just gets worse and worse, and it incrementally, each level gets larger. And by the first one level enhancement you get might be 8 more months on your sentence. But by the last time they add one, it's 5 years.
It's up to
4 years.
Right.
You say it gets worse and worse, and people don't realize that. It just gets, you just keep burying yourself. The more clever I got, the worse it got for me at sentencing.
Sure.
So the Gary Sullivan one is...
Now, he was one of many identities you had assumed, correct? There was at some point you had a bunch of different driver's licenses, passports.
Yeah, I had 27 driver's licenses in like 6 or 7 different states issued by that were issued by the state DMVs. Now,
driver's license.
Real driver. Like, I get pulled over, here you go.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, I know I was speeding. Got it. As opposed to making actually counterfeiting a driver's license, which I've done.
Which is a pain in the ass, you said. It's so much easier to just get the birth certificate, social security card, and then,
the cop pulls you over, you hand him your driver's license. Yes, what's up?
Yeah. So you're talking to Gary Sullivan, and there's this questionnaire that you do, and one of the questions is, do you have any misdemeanors? Because you're looking for people who are real but don't really use their credit or don't really use their credit profile.
Yeah, so I'm looking for people that have a real person, but basically just someone who's this is a real individual, but they're not using it. Like, you can't contact them. It's just out there, and so I figured, who could I do that with? Homeless people. And so I start surveying these guys, and why would they tell me their information? I'm going to go up and say, hey, I need your information. I'll buy your information. No, I need to trick you out of it. So I say, look, I work for the Salvation Army. We're trying to determine where we place our next homeless facility. Would you mind taking a survey? I very quickly realized they were like, no, not interested in it pays $20 cash right now. You're going to give me $20 cash right now? Right now. Okay, yeah, what do you need? 17 questions. He gives me all the information that he thinks a statistical surveyor or someone for the Salvation Army would use. I, of course, take that information, and I then apply online for his birth certificate, his social security card, maybe his high school transcripts. I order a copy of a credit report for him. Wow. I register to vote as him. I get 3 secured credit cards as him. I do all of these things. So I start very quickly accumulating all of this real documentation that I could get through the mail.
Yeah. And a credit profile.
Wow.
Oh, well, I create a credit profile, which is perfect. So, because he has no credit.
Yeah.
And even, as a matter of fact, he actually had some medical collections, which I paid off.
Oh, wow.
And I've had guys where I got their information, and then when I ordered their driver's license was suspended. And it's like, it's suspended because he didn't pay a $400 ticket. He's okay, $400 fine. Boom, pay the $400 fine. Now I got a driver's license.
Yeah.
So, I'm willing to clean them up.
Yeah.
I need that.
It's the least you can do
He's
for
the benevolent con man.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So, what ends up happening is I get an ID in his name. And so when I get the ID in his name in South Carolina, he was in Nevada, in Vegas. I go to South Carolina, get an ID as his name, buy a couple houses. Then I convince people to owner finance me their houses. I give you $20,000 down, $10,000, whatever. And then I turn around and I go downtown and I create a false satisfaction of mortgage, and I satisfy the loans on the house. Not just the loan to you as the person that just owner financed me the house, but you probably also had, it's called a wraparound, around a Bank of America or Federal Trust Bank or whatever it was. And so I have to satisfy those loans because I need to clean the title. So I create fake satisfactions, I send them in, and that's one of the things where I thought I was being cute. I signed like the satisfactions, C. Montgomery Burns from The Simpsons. And then you get in front of the judge and, you're sitting there like, yeah, I mean, how it looks. And the judge is just looking at me like, you bastard. Like, you're mocking, so it was just arrogance. So, and I never thought they'd catch it.
Yeah.
Which is another arrogance. I'm so smart, you'll never catch this. Wrong. So what happens is I do that. Now I own these houses free and clear. I then go out and I apply for loans in Gary Sullivan's name. And I borrow $1.3 million on a couple of houses that are only worth a couple $100,000.
Because you are getting a bunch of loans concurrent to one another before the banks find out there's a first mortgage or whatever.
I'm applying for Bank of America. I apply with Wachovia, Bank of America, SunTrust, all of these banks at the same time, and then I close them at different title companies, all within a day or two of each other. And so now they give me the money, and then the title company just mail in the documents. So I've got 1.3 million. At that time, there's no Bitcoin. There's none of the types of things the way you could easily move money now. So I just open up a bunch of bank accounts in different people's names, and I put the money in there, and then I start taking out the money, $9,000, $8,000. That one time I took out $29,000. They gave me a hard time. I'm just taking out money in them. But what happened was just by coincidence, and somebody went down late and actually saw the multiple satisfactions. They called the banks. The Wachovia gets involved. Wachovia puts a fraud alert out. So I walk in the bank one day as Gary Sullivan, and I ask for like $8,000 or $9,000. The teller says, "Oh, okay, hold on, Mr. Sullivan." She walks in the back. No big deal. It happens all the time. A new account, anything over $3,000 has to be approved. She walks in the back. I'm waiting 4 or 5 minutes. Next thing you know, 2 sheriff's deputies walk up behind me and grab me, handcuff me, grab my driver's license, and they walk in. They walk me in the other room, and they sit down and they say
at the bank.
At the bank, customers looking at me, just what's going on? And I'm sitting there going,
Are you? And you're handcuffed at this point?
I'm handcuffed. I think that's it. I'm done. It's over.
Yeah.
They've got me. I'm I already know I'm on the FBI's most wanted list, the Secret Service's most wanted list. I know the U.S. Marshals are looking for me. I know I'm done. I've called home. People are telling me that these people are waiting outside their houses. They're following. They're making calls. People are being interviewed. At this point, there's probably been 15 different articles about me. I mean, so I know, because prior to this, I'd stolen like $11.5 million in Tampa. So that was a whole bunch of
footnote.
Yeah,
sounds so bad. Sounds so bad. When you say it like that,
we're gonna get to redemption, right?
Sounds excessive.
You think?
So I know they're looking for me, and so they grab me. But these guys are like, hey, Mr. Sullivan, we've been told to detain you, and I'm thinking, Mr. Sullivan, that's okay. And I'm sitting there, I'm saying nothing. I'm like, I'm sitting there like just looking at these guys are glancing at me like nobody's talking. I guess I didn't know how to really behave other than, look, you don't know what's going on, you shut up. So I wait. The detective walks in. He comes in. He says, "Hey, my name's Detective." I forget his name. In the book, I used a name, but it wasn't his because I couldn't ascertain.
This book right here. I'll hold it up for YouTube,
Yeah.
right? Shark in the housing pool. And we'll put a link to this in the show notes as well. So if you're just listening to this, check it out in the show notes over at theminimalists.com/podcast.
So the detective comes in, he talks to me. He says, look, I said, what's going on? And he says, look, Wachovia said that you're running some kind of a scam. You've got a bunch of mortgages on this one house. And I actually had like 6 mortgages on the house. He goes, you have 3 mortgages on the house. And I remember thinking immediately, I'm like, okay, they know 3. Which 3? And I immediately, I said, is that illegal? And I remember he looked at me and he goes, I don't know. I remember I thought, I'm walking out of here. This guy, he doesn't have a clue. So then I'm like, okay, this is good. I do the whole golly gee whiz, golly gee whiz, officer, is that, illegal? I'm like, I don't understand. And, so, it just depends on who you're talking to, how you react. Like if I was talking to a bank employee or something, I would, you might be offended. This is law enforcement. They want the opposite.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you what you want. Golly gee whiz, officer, was that illegal? And so he sits down. He's like, I don't know. Let me get Wachovia's head of security on the phone. They get him on the phone. He immediately starts unraveling the scam. He's done this. He's done this. He's done this. And I'm sitting there. At every turn, he says something. He's got 3 first mortgages on the, 3 first mortgages. He's pulling money out of the bank. And he looks at me, and the detective looks at me, and I say, well, I don't know. I said, I don't think they were all first mortgages. I said, I got a first mortgage, a second mortgage, and I have a credit line. And he goes, that's not true. And I go, I read all the mortgages. None of the mortgages say they're first mortgages. Mortgages don't. It's the placement of the mortgages that determines first mortgage. So if you have 2 first mortgages, the lender might know, but it doesn't say it in public records. And I told him, look, I read the documents. I never saw that. So he's sitting there. The officer's like, okay. He's screaming one thing. The officer, I'm combating it. I'm coming up with rebuttals. And
the officer's not an expert at all.
Absolutely.
And so what he's going off of is intuition at this point.
Right. And listen, here's the thing. Like, this guy is the head of head of the fraud department knows what's going on.
Right.
Luckily for me, he was angry, and he's adamant, and he's sounding irrational. And so I'm just getting calmer and calmer, and I'm saying, look, I understand, he's upset. I borrowed 3 mortgages. I understand. Well, why did you get 3 mortgages? Well, I needed to try and get like $500,000 out because I want to buy several houses. And he goes, oh, that's right. You own another house here. I'm thinking, huh. I'm like, yes. I'm thinking, okay, so that scam's over. So I said that, yeah. And he goes, I said, I'm buying houses. I'm fixing them up and I'm selling them. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, why are you taking, he's like, he's pulling the money out in cash. And then he goes, why are you taking it out in cash? I said, well, I work for a labor company. And I said, and a lot of these guys, they get their checks and they don't have any way to cash a check. So I'll cash the check for them because, these cash places charge them like 10%. And he's like, yeah. And I go, maybe I'm not supposed to do that. Maybe that's illegal. And he looks at me and he goes, and he goes, no, that's fine. That's nice. It's fine. But at this point, by the way, he stopped calling me Mr. Sullivan. He's now calling me Gary. I'm calling him Richard. We're good. This is Richard. I'm Gary. And this jerk is yelling on the phone.
Yeah.
So what happens is we keep going back and forth, and at some point I remember saying, look, it sounds to me like they have a problem at the bank. I said, what makes more sense? And I give him my business card, says, Labor on Demand and Gary Sullivan and who I'm a site manager and blah, blah. I said, what makes more sense? I said that a guy who works at a labor...
This isn't a company, by the way, for folks listening.
Oh, no, there's no Labor on Demand.
It's
no.
just a business card.
It's a business card. If you called, though, I did have someone that answered the phone.
Like
which
a
was,
Regis.
The HQ
exactly.
thing.
Yeah. They would forward calls and they would take mail and, like an HQ or something I've had that where they'll take packages. This guy has no way of knowing that. And I register it. Like you could register it. You could, back then, I don't know if you can now, you could actually register your business like on the business directory. So if he goes and he looks for it, bring, it's going to come up. Like everything looks legit.
Yeah.
And my W-2s, which also said I worked there, was a real tax ID number to a company that was a labor company that was like in Miami, Florida. And I actually registered this company as a DBA. And so you just were done. If you really, I've had underwriters that are lending hundreds of thousands, of dollars, and they're investigating this stuff. And that's their whole job. They can't figure it out. It all looks good.
Wow.
Because I own the mortgage company, so I know what you're looking for. Been caught enough. So I argue with the guy. Eventually, he starts the head of Wachovia starts screaming, "This guy," he goes, "he's using a fake ID." So, well, I end up saying, look, what makes more sense? A guy from a labor company, guy that works at a labor company, convinced a bunch of banks to lend him $500,000. I said, I applied for a loan, and all the loan officers, I said, because this loan officer said, we'll lend you $200,000. I've got a friend that can lend you a second mortgage at another bank. She lent me that money, and she said, you know what? I got a friend that can lend you a credit line. They all knew what was going on. Mm-hmm. They all set up the closings. I don't know what's happening here. I don't feel like I've done it. I think the bank did something wrong. Listen, Wachovia is going nuts. The detective's shaking his head like, I don't think and he goes, yeah, listen, I don't know that this guy would be able to do this. And so Wachovia is going screaming, and then he says, it's a scam. He goes, look at his ID. He's got a fake ID. Now, here's the funny part. In South Carolina, their IDs started with like 0000. Well, the Wachovia guy is he's in California or something. He doesn't have a clue. So he gets, his ID starts with 0000. And so the detective says, no, our IDs start with 00. Mm-hmm. He goes, and I've run this guy through NCIC. He goes, this is Gary Sullivan. And I looked at him and I lean and I go, oh, now I'm not Gary Sullivan? I go, bro, come on, what are we doing here? And he sat there and he's like, I know Gary. And I mean, I there was actually a point where I started thinking, poor guy at Wachovia, like he's got me. Everything you're saying is right.
His ulcers are flaring.
Oh, it was so bad. At one point, the detective actually told him, you need to lower your voice. I mean, I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. So he says, look, I'm not going to arrest him. I don't even know what I can charge him with at this point. You guys lent him money that he applied for. There's nothing fraudulent. I mean, it's Gary Sullivan. I don't know what to tell you. And he said, so I'm going to find out from the district attorney what I could charge him with, if anything. He said, I'm waiting for her to get back with me. He said, and that's it. He said, I'm going to take him downtown. I'm going to fill out a police report, and I'm going to release him. This guy went nuts. And he's like, look, I'm sorry. You have to call down. You can file a complaint also. You can talk to. So he hangs up the phone. We get up. I go to get up, and he says to me, okay, I'm going to have you follow me back to the police. The detectives the deputies are still there. I'm going to have you follow back to the police department or sheriff's department, whatever it was. And I went,
lets you get in your car and drive yourself to the police department.
And I remember he said, he goes, okay, he said, you have an ID. He said, why don't you have a driver's license? And I went, well, I didn't have insurance and I don't have a car. And I said, I have, and he goes, do you have a driver's license? I said, yeah, I do. I said, it's in Nevada. And he goes, oh, that's right. You're from Nevada. And I remember thinking, as soon as he said that, like when I interviewed Gary Sullivan to get his information, he had said he had been arrested for two misdemeanors for prostitution. Mm-hmm. And he was a male prostitute. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, okay. So he ran me through NCIC. And as soon as he says, oh, that's right, you're from Nevada, he glances at the two deputies. The deputies glance at each other and all grin. And I think, they think I've been arrested for male prostitution. They think it was so, I was this close to saying, listen, man, my name's Matt Cox.
Right. The ego is strong, right?
I just was like, you stay strong. You say nothing. You're walking out of here. So I end up.
So you didn't start flirting with the deputies or anything?
No, listen, what I did say, and this actually sounds funny, because when I said it, I didn't think how it sounds. It sounds very like, woo, it sounds like that. Right. It does, but it was not said in that way. They said, he goes, okay, so do you have a driver's license? I said, yeah, in Nevada. And I don't know if Gary Sullivan has a driver's license in Nevada. Uh-huh. How am I supposed to know that? I didn't ask him. I don't know if it's a valid driver's license. He's homeless.
Right.
So he says, he goes, oh, that's right, you're from Nevada. He goes, okay. And he goes, and it's valid? I said, I'm pretty sure it is. I don't know why it wouldn't be. And the deputy goes, yeah, I'll check it out. He grabs my ID and walks off. Goes to his car, and I'm thinking, Now the DMV can't pull up photos from other states. It's a 48-hour. It's a 48-hour a lag time. At that point, it was a hub system. Almost positive it's still a hub system. They have to request it. Wow. So I sat there, and I'm thinking, what about the car? What about the cop car? What about the cop car? What can he do? What can he do? Can he pull it up? And I wait, so I'm sweating bullets until he walks back and he goes, yeah, it's fine. He hands him the ID. He goes, yeah, it's fine. And he goes, checks out. He goes, what? It says he's 5'10". And they all look at me and I go, well, with a good pair of shoes, like that. And they all go, ha, 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 Gary, follow us.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
come on, boys, with a good pair of heels.
yeah. So I walk out, I get in my car, I follow him back to the police station.
Did you think about running at that point?
Well, no, because there's a sheriff's deputy. The sheriff's deputies are behind me in their car. The detectives in his car in front of me. I'm behind them. So although they're saying like, oh yeah, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be fine, I'm still feeling like, why is he behind me?
Right.
It may not be fine.
You knew you had to outsmart them if you wanted to get out of this.
I'm not jumping on. I'm not a race car driver, and I'm not driving a race car. I'm driving a G35, which was the brand new Infiniti, and it's got 300 and some odd horsepower, but it ain't outrunning the cops or a helicopter. You're just done.
Yeah.
So anyway, I go back, and I'm on my way. I remember the girl I was with, who repeatedly had, when I would go into a bank or something.
This was the Bonnie and Clyde thing, and we'll get more into her story. What's her name? Becky?
Becky.
Yeah.
So Becky, every time I'd ever gone into a bank, not every time, but most times I would walk in the bank, cash a check. Periodically she would say, she'd go, what if you get arrested? And I would say, okay, well, if I get arrested, I'll be arrested as Michael Cutter, or I'll be arrested as Scott Cugno. I've got a valid driver's license. I have everything on me. All his credit cards, everything. I pocket litter as Scott Cugno, everything. So I'm like, they'll be arresting. My identity's not in question. And back then, I don't know how it is now. I'm sure it's got to be better now. But back then, they had to request. They ran your fingerprints through APHIS, but they have to pay for that.
This is 2005-ish?
This was 2005, right.
Okay.
So 2005, 2006. So if I do get caught, they would tip, a lot of these places would only run your fingerprints if your identity was in question. My identity's not in question.
Yeah.
And so I was like, look, I've talked to sheriff's deputies like in prison and stuff, and they were like, oh, listen, there were sometimes we would never run them. Like we would do it like in batches, every month or so, and then you'd find out, hey, these 3 people were lying, or he said because they charge us and this and that. Now I don't know how it is now, but so I said, look, worst case scenarios. I used to always say the worst case scenario, I'll be arrested as Scott Cugno, and you go immediately get me a lawyer, and you can get me out on bond. Whatever I'm arrested for, it's going to be minor. It's going to be lying on an application. It's going to be cashing a check, on a fraudulent loan. And even if they come in and they say, the worst they'll do is, let's say it's a $100,000 loan, and they say, okay, we want a $100,000 bond. Great, go get the bondsman $10,000, put up a couple of houses, get me out. She can do that.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would say that, and she would be like, okay. And I was always nervous because I was like, why do you keep asking me that? Because I kept thinking, what did you want me to say? Take the money and run. I'm no gangster. You get me out of prison. So I'm on my way back, and I see that my phone is just tons of phone calls. I've been in the bank for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, what's up? She's, where have you been? What's going on? I go, listen, here's what happened. I tell her right quick. Boom, 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 boom. And she goes, oh my God, you don't understand that. She goes, you're number 1 on the Secret Service's most wanted list. She said, there was just an article came out. She's like screaming. She's like, oh my God. I go, look, I'm going to the police station right now. She goes, get on the interstate. Get on the interstate. And I go, I can't. The cops are behind me and in front of me. I can talk my way. I just talked my way out of handcuffs. I'm going to walk out of that precinct. I assure you. And I said, so what if you get arrested? I go, worst case scenario is if I get arrested. And I remember she goes, I'm not getting you a lawyer. I'm not getting you out on bond. And I just remember being like, the heat shot up through my body.
I just used my lifeline and it's dead.
Right.
I just remember thinking, oh my God. And I was like, well, then I better not get arrested. And I hung on the phone. I get out. I go in there. I fill out the police report. He fills it out. He then says, can you wait in the hallway? I go and wait in the hallway. While I'm in the hallway, God, there's all these wanted posters, whatever, bicycle thieves, car thieves, bank robbers, and they're all black and white. And there's only one in color wanted poster, and it's me.
Oh my God.
And I remember looking, and I stepped back, and it's like 10 feet away. I step back to see, no, that's definitely me. That's definitely me. And I'm like, and he walks up behind me. Hey, Gary, what's up? I was like, oh, and I'm, and this is the thing. I've had people say, well, why didn't you run? Well, you've never been in a police station.
Right.
Because you
run
can't
from it.
run. First of all, I'm on the second floor. Secondly, you need a code to get in the elevator. You need a code to turn on the elevator. You need a code to get out of the elevator. You need a code to get through the front door. You need a code to get out, into the building. There's 6 layers of security that I'm not going to get through.
No.
So I'm waiting. He says, "Yo, you ready to go?" I'm like, "Yeah." I get outside. He says, "Listen, I talked to the district attorney, and she's got some questions, and we're going to walk over and we're going to figure out what's going on. But do me a favor." He goes, don't leave town." Like that, I go, "Bro," I said, "I own 2 houses." I said, "I'm not going anywhere."
Wink, wink.
I get in the car. I drive. This is how arrogant. I drive to another bank, get money out. I drive to another bank, get money out.
Oh
I drive
my
to
God.
another bank. The next bank I go to, though, as soon as I walk in, like, every clerk, every staff member in the place goes. I mean, you could feel like suddenly the tension went, and I was like, and there's 2 women almost banged into each other trying to go for the phone.
Oh my God.
So I was like, "Nah, I don't want to talk to that detective again." No.
Yeah.
So I turn around, I get in my car. When I leave, I remember one of the women came out and was looking like at my license tag. Like, I mean, it's like I wasn't questioning it. Like, it wasn't possible that I was even wrong. And so I immediately get on the interstate and I drive, I take off, and that's the story. My problem with that story is that it does take some time to set it up.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good, man.
You know what this story does, and we're going to get into more of the stories as well that you cover in your book and your other books, because you also write a lot about what happened during your time in prison. I'm going to fast forward a little bit before, and we'll get back to the stories on the Maximal. But let me just say this: eventually, you're caught. I love the story about you getting caught. We're going to cover that. I want to explore with you an alternate reality. What happens if you don't? And how are things different over the last 13 years? So, eventually, you're caught. You are sentenced to 26 years.
Yeah. It's 26 years and 4 months, but I don't typically say the 4 months because it makes me sound like I'm whining.
And so, spoiler alert, you end up doing 12 for a bunch of complicated reasons that we'll probably dive into some of those. But you spent the last 12 years in federal prison.
Yeah. Speaking of minimalists, I lived out of a locker that was like, is it like 18 inches? They're 18 inches by 2 feet by 3 feet high.
Right.
Wow.
So I don't know how many cubic feet that is. I think it was like, whatever, like 15 cubic feet or so. Like my whole life was in that locker. And I lived out of the locker for, 12 and a half years.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
So let's talk about redemption. I pulled up this definition of redemption, and I'll try to adjust it a little bit, but redemption just means the action of saving or being saved from sin, error, or evil. That sounds really moralizing. So let's try to redefine it in a way. We've all done some bad things, right? And some people more extreme than others. But I think the lesson here is that we can start over. We can begin again. I was meditating this morning right before we started recording, and one of the sort of lessons of meditation is when you screw up in the meditation, even though they wouldn't use those terms, but like your mind gets entangled with thoughts. You can always begin again. Right. And in a way, you've been able to begin again. And in fact, you weren't supposed to be out until 2030.
Right.
So you sort of got 10 or 11 years of, I don't know, bonus time.
Yeah, this is free time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved when I talked to you on the phone and you were like, hey, I basically get the next 10 years to explore any of this, like, because any of it's better than being back in prison.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like I can do anything for the next 10 years and fail at everything I do. If none of it works and I fail, and you could basically drop me off in the parking lot of the prison, and I'd be in the same, it'd be like, okay, well, this is pretty much where I was supposed to get out anyway, and I could start over then. I can always go to work for FedEx then.
Yeah.
So I can. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth exploring, trying to do stuff that I love to do and that I enjoy doing because this was just a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that redemption, we're talking about it here, it's not about fixing the past necessarily. We can't go back and right every wrong, but we can sort of get past the past.
Right.
And you've been able to do that through writing. And I'm really happy to see this huge turn for you. And I know you're still figuring a lot of things out. You've got your website, InsideTrueCrime.com. You can find your books there. We'll link to all this in the show notes. But what I really like here is this is a brand new path for you, and it doesn't fix what happened, and even the prison time doesn't fix it necessarily, right?
No.
But you're on the other side of it, and you're almost looking at it as though it's in the rear view, and there's some irony in the fact that you had a bunch of different driver's licenses and stuff. But I think the Matthew Cox of 2005 is a different person from the Matthew Cox of today. And I'd like to explore just briefly how you think you're different in a way.
I think the first question was like, what if I hadn't been caught?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny. I like don't ever. I don't know if maybe when I first got locked up, I might have thought like, oh, I should have done this. You do the bargaining or questioning, or you're angry or I'm angry or whatever, and that went on for a long period of time. And I never really thought about that. I guess I thought maybe I would have gone to Australia. Maybe I would have. There's all these maybes, but in the end, basically, I'm still just a scumbag that's on the run, hiding for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know, maybe technology catches up to me, maybe it doesn't catch up to me, but I mean, I think in the end, I think I mentioned this to you, and I mention this every once in a while, is that, basically, is that I had tons of money. This is so horrible too, because guys will make screaming comments in the comment section where I'm like, I didn't have any money. I had like 80,000. That's all the money I had. And so I was broke. And they're like, 80,000, you're broke. What are you talking about? Somebody asked me the other day, like, well, how much money did you have? At one point, I'm like, I never really had that much money at one point, like in cash. I was like, I mean, I would have maybe a couple $1 million in the bank, but I only had like maybe 600,000 in cash. And they'd be like, what? And they look at me like,
yeah.
Did you not understand the question? I'm thinking, yeah, but you got to live the rest of your life on that money,
right.
Or I got to get the money out of the bank. So my point is that that all that did for me was create anxiety, panic attacks, unhappiness, arrogance, anger. I mean, there were all these things, and at the time, had no clue. Didn't have a clue that bothered me. Mm-hmm. Doesn't everybody have panic attacks every couple of weeks? Doesn't everybody not be able to sleep? Don't you have to lay in bed for 2 hours before you eventually pass out? Don't you have to take a Xanax to go to sleep?
Oh,
that's
wow.
crazy. What do you mean you just fall asleep like that? What do you mean? That's crazy. So there's all these things that to me was just regular life.
Yeah.
And so eventually, when I did so I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, maybe I live out the rest of my life and it's amazing. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think I live out the rest of my life. Maybe I don't get caught. Maybe I do. I think I'm so arrogant that eventually I would have told somebody else, and they would have caught up with me.
Yeah.
Listen, there's hundreds of thousands of law enforcement people looking for you. You're going to get caught.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think what happened was I got arrested. I went to prison. I had 2 panic attacks when I was in prison. 2. And they were literally, as opposed to the panic attacks on the street where I literally stopped, and if there was nothing to sit down, I would have dropped on the ground in an Indian style and just sit there. I've done that before in a supermarket because I was in the middle of the aisle. There was no place to sit. I literally sat down. People are walking by like, what's with this guy?
Wow.
Because it was just overwhelming, and it only lasts a minute or two, but it's not a good minute. And so in prison I had 2 where I'm walking along and literally I kind of like stopped and I could feel the tingle, took a couple breaths, and it was over, and I kept walking. And I got 26 years. That's the most stress. That's what it caught up with.
Wow.
So, what happened was eventually I start writing. And when I start writing my fellow inmates' stories and I start writing my story,
Yes.
And you start looking into yourself and reading books about how to write and how to write a memoir and all of the things that I would have told you meant nothing. Suddenly you start looking at yourself and looking at your past and looking at what those catalysts are that cause you to do certain things. And, it starts unraveling. And I very quickly realized that, you are a narcissist. You know, you are arrogant. You are these things. You are, you know, this isn't the media. This isn't bullshit. This is what's happening, and this is just who you are.
Yes.
And it's horrible, and it's a bad situation, and you need to start working on it. And although I feel like I work on it all the time, I think I told you this. I feel horrible for like friends of mine, you know, because I just dominate conversations. I have friends that literally they'll be talking for a couple of minutes, and then they'll say something. I'll go, oh man, that reminds me. My ex-wife. They go, whoa. We're talking about me right now. Give me 5 more minutes, and we're going to talk about you the rest of lunch. And you know, and you would think if that happened, you would think that people would get upset about that. But I'm always like, I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah.
Because I dominate conversations. I will come in, I will dominate the conversation. I will walk away 20 minutes later, and I don't know a fucking thing about you. And that's just an asshole. You're just an asshole.
Well, so here's the difference, I think. And by the way, here's how Matt Cox is Ryan Nicodemus, or is Josh Milburn, or is anyone else who's listening to this. I think you began to discover some things about yourself, and naming those things, and realizing that's not the person that you wanted to be. Ryan and I, you know, we grew up really poor, thought the key to happiness was to make a lot of money in our 20s.
Right.
And so we climbed the corporate ladder. And by age 30, we were living the American dream. But we weren't the people that we wanted to be either. We were jerks. We had addiction problems. We had consumption problems. We had a lot of problems, and we covered it up because of the ostensible success. And yours, I mean, you were very successful in one way. I mean, you were
It certainly appeared to be.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we are. And so quite often there's one small compromise. That's why I started the podcast with this small compromise of your values. Usually it's because we don't even know what our values are. At the time, you're like, I just need some money, and so, okay, I'm willing to make this one small compromise. But then, of course, that one small compromise leads to 2 to 6 to 20 to $1.3 million in Tampa, or whatever it is, right? And all of a sudden, you're like, how did I get here? Well, it was one bad decision at a time.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about redemption, I think the difference of the Matt Cox of yesteryear versus the Matt Cox of today, it doesn't mean you figured everything out. Ryan and I certainly haven't figured everything out, but you have figured something out. And it's that the life you were living before was not a meaningful life.
Right.
In fact, it was the opposite of that. It was causing immense stress and discontent, and it may have been sexy. You could make a great movie out of it, right? But like, you can't actually make a good movie out of the real contented people. The most contented people I know, like we're going to have Leo Babauta on here, probably the most contented person I've ever met.
Yeah.
The movie of his life would suck.
Yeah.
Because there's no drama.
Right.
You don't want drama in your real life. It's great on that glowing screen.
Right.
It's great in your book. And it's great that you've gotten past it. And what I'm seeing now with Matt Cox, and I can see it, I'm looking toward the horizon here. And I'll just say this. I want to acknowledge you. I'm proud of you, man.
Amen.
Like the direction that you've moved in, like I can see this really developing into a meaningful life. And so
It already has. I mean,
Yeah.
it already has.
Yeah.
Amen.
So, you know, I mean, it just has. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you're wrapping it up, but I mean, I was saying, like, when I was in prison, I have a friend named Pete who's there for, this is going to sound horrible. He's there for conspiracy to murder 2 confidential informants that were murdered.
Oh, wow.
Didn't do it.
just like everyone else in prison.
Well, nice. Actually wrote a book about him. He's nicest guy you've ever met, and super knows who he is. And I remember talking to him one time, and we were talking, and we were talking about somebody else, and I was like, "Why does he act like that?" And he goes, "I mean, he just hadn't figured it out yet." And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I mean, you can't come to prison and continue to behave the way you did prior to prison." He goes, "and then leave prison and expect not to return." And he goes, "You have to come here, you have to figure out who you are and what you're meant to do, and you have to do that and leave prison." He goes, "You'll be okay." And I went, have I figured? I said, well, I need to figure that out. He goes, I need to figure that out. And he goes, no, you figured it out. And I went, doing what? He goes, writing.
Yeah.
And so it was funny because after that conversation, people would say, what are you gonna do when you get out? And I was like, I'm gonna figure out how to make money just being me. And they were like, what do you mean? You know, I only say it to spark the conversation. You know, and they go, what do you mean? I said, doing the things that I love to do. Then I don't have to work. I can just write and I can paint and I can just do the things that I like to do. And then, you know, and I'll be able to make money at that and that'll pay my bills. They're like, yeah, but you're not going to get into real estate. You're not going to make this. I'm like, no, because I was never really happy. When I had a couple million in the bank and I had a $100,000 sports car, I was driving a bunch of big houses and I had 12 employees going, Matt, hey. And I had all these friends around me that I thought were friends that guess what? They weren't friends.
Right.
You know, all those things, and every girl I knew that ever dated me, and everybody was like, how are you dating that chick? And it was like, I was like, she likes me, bro. I'm cool. I like that. No, that's not what it was, because I wasn't cool. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She's dating me because this guy's got money, this guy's this, this guy's that. Those girls wouldn't date me now. So, anyway, you know, those things, like I got to prison and I realized that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to figure it out. And if I have to live in someone's spare room and I have to, you know, I'm going to do, if I have to live in a spare room and I have to drive a piece of crap Jeep, you know, and then that's what I'll do until it works for me. And if it does, and I can do this for 10 years.
Yes.
And if in 10 years from now, when I was supposed to be getting out of prison in 2030, then I can always go get a job at Walmart. I can always go do that regular thing that, you know, and I'll still be ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really, and listen, let me tell you something. I'm super happy. Like I didn't realize how unhappy I was
I could tell
until that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know. That's it. I'm so glad I got through that without tearing up. I really am, because let me tell you something. I cry like a baby, bro. Like, you know, telling these stories, like if you get into the stories and you start talking, like every once in a while I'll have some guy say something about, well, you know, hey, what happened with your dad? Oh my God. And I literally like look at the guy for a second like, you bastard. Because I'm in tears within 2 minutes.
Well, we're certainly going to try to make Matt Cox cry on the Maximal episode today. A lot of emotional stories that we still need to talk about. All right, before we get into our listener tips and our added value segment today, it looks like we got a bunch more surprise questions this week. Like, how do we find forgiveness from ourselves and others for past transgressions? How do we ensure we carry forward the lessons learned from our past mistakes? How do we honestly discuss our checkered paths with new friends and acquaintances? How do we start building a new life when our past has been decimated? Plus a million more questions for Matt Cox and the Minimalists, a bunch of stories as well. And if you want to hear all that, subscribe to our Maximal episodes on the Minimalist Private Podcast. It's a completely separate podcast, and it's the most honest way for the Minimalists to earn an income, because we don't believe in advertisements. By the way, if you're not a private podcast supporter, you're literally missing 2/3 of our show, plus hundreds of past episodes, the past private episodes that we have there, hundreds of hours of those private episodes. So try it out for a week or a month. We think it will add immense value to your life. It's cheaper than a cup of coffee too. So head on over to theminimalists.com/support to subscribe and get your personal link so that our private podcast plays in your favorite podcast app. Let's see what else we got here. Some voicemail comments and tips from our listeners. Check them out.
Hi, my name is Sarah Powell, and I am from Boise, Idaho. I was just calling because I saw your guys' video on Netflix about a year and a half ago, and the next day after that, I had my own packing party and packed down my house. I'm also a mom of 2 small kids. I just got finished listening to your guys' podcast about being a minimalist with kids. I have found that I do a lot less cleaning since there's a lot less stuff for my kids to make a mess with. I've also found that my kids use their imaginations more and actually get the use out of the toys that they do have. As far as like gifts and stuff like that, I've asked my family to gift them experiences. So we have like a year pass to the zoo, a year pass to our one of our local museums here. Stuff like that are always great gift ideas.
Hello, this is Megan. I am 27 from Tempe, Arizona. and I just had a comment. So I just got out of a divorce and had to move into a 1-bedroom apartment. I previously lived in a 3-bedroom house with lots and lots of stuff. And when I moved, I decided I would only take the essentials with me. And so now I'm in a very empty apartment. I don't even have a couch. I've been sitting on the living room floor. But my comment was I have made a list of the things that I want to buy for the apartment, and I am waiting 2 weeks for any item that has been added to the list. And the list everything has a date on it from when it's added, so that I know that I'm waiting enough time to see if it's something that I actually need or if it's something that I can go without.
All right, y'all. Thanks again to Matt Cox for joining us today. Check out 2 of his books. We're going to put links to both of these in the show notes. He's written a bunch of books. You can find all his books at InsideTrueCrime.com. He has a YouTube channel of the same name where he goes into a lot of deep stories there. But help him out with 2 of his books, Shark and the Housing Pool, where he tells his whole story of getting caught and then going through prison and a lot of the stories in there. And while he was in prison, he began writing a bunch of books about people who are in the prison. That's the fascinating thing about these true crime stories is they're almost so radical that they're implausible if we were to write them as fiction, and they can be written only as these nonfiction stories. And his newest book is called It's Insanity, and it's a perfect title for the book because it's an insane story about a guy. Well, you know what? I'm not even going to get into it. I would ruin it. We'll talk more about it on the Maximal episode as well, but check out the book, It's Insanity, and also Matt's story, Shark and the Housing Pool. Thank you so much for joining us today, Matt. And for our added value this week, well, I'm wondering if movies are dead. Here's my thought. Actually, I'm going to recommend a movie, and it's not Tenet. We know that's for sure. I've got Jordan Moore here.
I feel like that was my cue in.
A few weeks ago, Jordan was out in Phoenix.
I heard about this conversation, by the way.
He went to watch Tenet, and it was like, I've got to go see it 3 more times. It's so amazing. And so I went to go see it. I drove out of LA County because you have to go out of LA County to watch movies right now. And Bex and I drove up to Ventura County, and we were in a socially distanced theater. And when I say socially distanced, we were basically the only customers in the entire theater. 16 different movie theaters, and it was like I was in North Korea for a moment, like where they affect these entire hotels just for one tourist. That's what it felt like I was in the movie theater.
Pyongyang.
Yeah, it felt like I was in Pyongyang. And so we go in there, we start watching the movie, and I wish my future self could go back in time and warn me about this film.
That was a good one, by the way.
So I got a text from Josh the other night, and it just said, "Can I get a refund?" And without context, I was like, I have no clue where this is going.
Uh-oh.
But no, it was apparently he didn't like Tenet. And
what did you love about this film?
I mean, honestly, what I liked about it was so, like, I felt ashamed or disappointed in myself when I, like, leaving the movie thinking what I was thinking going into the movie. Mm-hmm. There was just so much more. It was so complex, and there were so many. Like, there's only 3 major set pieces,
right?
But you see it like 6 times,
right?
So I was blown away by the intelligence of the movie. Yeah, I guess.
I think that's where you and I maybe disagree. Like, to me, there was something about the film. I remember this is back in the early '80s when Jay-Z and Nas were feuding. Jay-Z had this great line. He said, just because you don't understand him doesn't mean that he's bright. It just means you can't understand the stupid things that he writes. And there was this moment where I'm like, there's a lot of intelligence here. Or maybe they're just trying to make me feel like it's really intelligent.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's so one of my texts back to you is I said you saw Inception and you didn't like that, so you knew what you're in for.
Yeah,
is
that's true.
some people will make fun of Nolan for his headiness. It's just like it's just full of it's so what's that word?
Are you looking for cerebral?
Yeah, but it's there's just a lot. There's a lot of exposition. There's a lot of they got to do walk and talk to explain all of the science of it.
Here's the thing: I didn't actually hate the film. I think I went in. Here's the case for anti-expectations. You go into it with a particular expectation, and it just didn't live up to that. But let me just say this: the film seemed incredibly well done, and I think it's a rather unique premise. Without ruining it, it has to do with manipulating time, but in a way that we haven't really seen before. It's time travel, but all travel is time travel, really, when you think about it. But it's time travel from a different perspective. I don't want to ruin anything. And I'm not saying don't go see the film. I'm saying it didn't resonate with me personally. It resonated with someone like Jordan, but the reason I said maybe films are dead right now is I don't actually believe that, but part of me does. And here, like, you saw this video, the viral video recently of Nathan Apodaca, the guy who was skateboarding, drinking the cranberry juice, listening to Fleetwood Mac's Dreams. Have you seen that TikTok video?
No.
It's gone. We'll watch it after this.
Okay. I've seen it.
Yeah, it's just so he's a factory worker in Idaho, and his car breaks down, and he makes these TikTok videos, and he starts longboarding to work, and he grabs his cranberry juice, and he's drinking, he's singing a Fleetwood Mac song, and he's filming himself. It's just a quick video, and this thing explodes. I mean, probably hundreds of millions of views over the course of the first few days, and the Fleetwood Mac song has gotten more downloads than ever before.
Yeah, it actually returned to the charts.
Yeah, that song's from '77.
The same thing with I don't know if you remember this. This was a few months back. Two guys have a YouTube channel, and they were watching. They had never seen the song "In the Air Tonight" by Phil Collins.
Yeah.
And they watched it, and they were analyzing it. And when they, the drum breakdown, which is like the biggest part of that song.
Sure.
When it hits, they just were like, "Oh my God!" Just the reaction, and it put that song back on the charts again.
Yeah, and my whole point is that we can watch those, and those things are made for free, and you have a movie like Tenet, which is $225 million, plus probably another $250 million in marketing, by the way. So $500 million film. But I can watch Nathan Apodaca, whose car's broken down, and I get literally get more joy out of that than I did from the Tenet experience. And I think the same is true, like with a lot of other things that are going on. Like there was a piece of me who just wanted to go home and watch like Barstool One Bite pizza reviews. Instead of watching Tenet, and there's a piece of me that makes me think like, we can't, especially with movie theaters are dying, right? Regal just announced they closed all their theaters in the United States. Yeah. They laid off 40,000 people.
Wow. Are they done? I know they were getting closed.
They've furloughed all of them, so they may never open them again, though. Well, to be determined. Right. Hopefully not. I really enjoy going to the movies. It's a wonderful experience. I know this is where Jordan and we do agree.
Yeah.
We really enjoy the movie experience.
That's what I was going to say about your statement. Is movies are movies dead? It's not that. I think you'd reframe it and say that is the theater experience dead? Right. Has it changed to a more personal experience?
Yeah.
I've been saying this for months, going back on my podcast, Flick of the Week. Mm-hmm. We were talking about the Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. I think that's over. The superhero genre, this huge, big blockbuster genre, it's over. We're on that new. Think about what happened in the 70s. Mm-hmm. We had these gritty movies, and then Star Wars came out, and then it became blockbuster, and then it goes back.
It's like the O'Toole.
We always ebb and flow into big blockbuster movies, then down into the personal dramas. Yeah. I think we're on the cusp of that again.
Well, I think now it's more than personal. It's personalized in a way, right? It's one person using the camera on their phone to capture the hearts and minds of people. And I'm not saying movies are dead. What I'm really saying is maybe that movie-going experience is
the medium's changing.
Yeah. So let me just say this, though. Here's something we'll be able to agree on. I don't think you've seen this film yet. Here's my added value for the week, and I need to move on here. But there's a new film on Netflix called Anon. Have you seen it?
No.
Anon, Anon. It has Clive Owens in it, and there's several other people. But aesthetically, it's one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful film I've ever seen. Very minimalist in terms of aesthetics. You'll also really like the premise. I don't want to give it away, but we're living in a not too distant future where everyone is identifiable. You're able to see them through your eyes. Like if I were to look at you, I would see a little box around your head, and it would say, Jordan no more, and age. I don't know how old you are, 18, 17.
Sounds like Black Mirror almost.
It is Black Mirror-esque. Did you see it?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
It looks filmed like, it looks like a better version of a Black Mirror film. Yeah, it's gorgeous. The set design, the lighting, the atmospherics. It is a gorgeous film. I don't. If it didn't have a plot, I would watch the film. It was so beautiful, and so really well done. Anon, or Anon, like as an anonymous, is the title. It's a Netflix film. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Real quick for right here, right now, here's one thing that's going on in the life of the minimalist. Today we've been talking about redemption. One of the reasons we get into trouble a lot of the time is we are irresponsible with our finances. You saw this with Matt Cox today. He's certainly he was irresponsible with finances, and he felt like he needed more. But of course, financial freedom comes from when we have control over whatever resources we do have. So Ryan and I put together a free ebook. It's called Financial Freedom. It's the 5 steps that he and I use to get out of debt. It's an absolutely free ebook. You can download it over at theminimalists.com/resources. That's our resources page, a bunch of free resources there. But check out the free ebook. It's called Financial Freedom, and it's a 5-step guide of how Ryan and I, exactly the step-by-step process we used. In fact, we call it difficult steps, the 5 difficult steps to get out of debt. They're simple steps, but they're not easy. It is difficult to get out of debt. We want to acknowledge that. But if you are out of debt, you can experience financial freedom. That's a free ebook called Financial Freedom over at our website. You can follow The Minimalists on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Minimalists. Come to one of our live podcast shows. Visit theminimalists.com/tour to find a city near you. If you have a question, comment, or minimalism tip for our podcast, email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. You can comment on this episode at youtube.com/theminimalists. And if you want our show notes in your inbox, sign up for our email list over at theminimalists.com. And if you leave here today with just one message, we hope it's this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.